Hello, everybody. Today I wanted to come to you to talk about one of the other forms that is now available to agents that has been revised by the Florida Realtors Association. So I wanted to make sure that you guys understood how to fill this form out, when you should use it, okay, and when you shouldn't use it. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the showing agreement and what's the difference between the showing agreement and the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, which is the buyer agreement. Okay. So I want to go ahead and make sure that you guys know the difference between both and when you should use one or the other. So I'm going to share my screen. And but before I share my screen, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, please. Button should be there somewhere around there somewhere. So make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel so that way you can get updated on any new forms that are coming in. Make sure you like, you share it. Thank you very much. And we will go ahead and get started. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here and we are going to talk about the showing agreement. Now, what's important about the showing agreement and when can you use it? This is a great agreement that you can use. If, for example, if you come across a buyer that you haven't really met yet, maybe you're still kind of like just getting to know them. They're calling you maybe from an open house, or they're calling you from Zillow or realtor.com, and they want to go see this one property, right? You haven't really built a relationship with them, but remember that we do need to have some sort of signed agreement before we show a property. So this is the one that you're going to share with them until you get to know them and they decide to work with you permanently, okay? And that at that point, you would then have them sign the exclusive buyer agreement. So this is kind of the form that you're going to use to kind of date your buyer. And then the exclusive buyer agreement is going to be the one when you marry the buyer. Okay. So let's go at it with this form. This is called the showing agreement. Parties. And you will notice that they have changed here. It used to say buyer. It has been changed to consumer. You will also see that on the exclusive buyer agreement that they changed the word buyer to now consumer. Parties, consumer being the buyer, right? You're going to put the buyer's information in here, or the buyers, or whoever is going to be on the sale of this property. So if it's a mother, a father, a son, if it's maybe the mother and now maybe the son might join in, whoever you feel is going to be on the property or the contract or the offer that you're going to make, those are the parties that you're going to put here. And it is between agrees that if between, you're going to put a date. So if I'm going to go show a property tomorrow, I'm going to put tomorrow's date and 11:59 p.m. on what date. Is this is a showing agreement is more if you're going to maybe show one, maybe two houses at the most, just so you build that relationship with that buyer. And now you're able to marry that buyer and sign an exclusive buyer agreement. So this will protect you if they go see one or two properties and maybe one of those two properties, they want to use you to make an offer. This is basically replacing that buyer brokerage agreement just for those properties you go to see. The exclusive buyer agreement covers the whole umbrella. It covers any property you go take them to see. So you're going to put an expiration on this. I would say that if you're planning to take them out to see one or two homes, or you take them one now and maybe one tomorrow, then you give yourself at least a week. Expires on, okay? Becomes interested in touring, negotiating the purchase, option, exchange, lease, or other acquisition of any of the properties listed below. Consumer will utilize the professional services of, here's where you're going to put the broker, not your name. See how it says broker here? Who's our broker? La Rosa Realty. So you're going to put La Rosa Realty. In parentheses, you can put your name, just like we do on some of the contracts. But for the most part, it's the broker, okay? Just like it states here. Should consumer, again, buyer, enter into either a fully executed contract for sale and purchase or a contract to lease on property listed in paragraph 2, the term of this agreement will automatically extend through the date of the actual closing or lease execution by all parties. What does that mean? If I have an agreement that tomorrow my agreement starts and my agreement ends, let's say Saturday, okay? and we make an offer on the property on Friday, this still will stand because it will stand past the closing date of that property. Okay, so you're still protected. However, if this expires on Saturday and your buyer now decides to make an offer on Sunday, this is no longer valid. So you have to make sure you have that exclusive buyer agreement signed before you place that offer, or you risk the possibility of not getting paid. Okay, and you need that agreement signed. So make sure that you stay within your date and make sure that you are covered. All right, so property, this agreement applies to the following properties. Those are the addresses that you're going to put in here if you're planning to show them 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a showing agreement. I would not use this if you're planning to show them 18 different properties. At that point, you're married to them. This is just your dating. When you date, you might go out to dinner once or twice before you commit to something more serious. So make sure that you put in here the addresses for the property that you're going to go see. And this agreement will only cover those properties, not another property. So if they go see these 2 properties, but then they tell you, no, Teresa, I saw another one on Zillow and I want to just go ahead and make an offer on that one, that property is not covered. So now you need an exclusive buyer agreement. All right, broker's obligation, broker assistance. If consumer wants to negotiate a transaction on any of the above properties, broker will use broker's professional knowledge and skills. Use diligent effort to show consumer the above described properties. Again, the above described properties, the ones you listed. Assist consumer in negotiating and closing any resulting transaction and cooperate with real estate licensees, working with the owner, if any, to complete a transaction. Consumer agrees that broker may work with other prospective consumers who want to acquire the same property. What does that mean? That if you're disclosing that, let's say you have 2 buyers who are interested in the same property, that you're disclosing that you can represent both buyers. Okay. If they want to make an offer, you can make both offers for 2 different buyers because you're disclosing that. Okay. Let's go back over here. Other consumers agree that broker may work with other prospective consumers who want to acquire the same property as consumer. Consumer agrees that broker may make competing consumers aware of the existence of any other offer. Doesn't mean you're going to share the information about that offer, but you can share that there might be another offer from another client that you're representing. So long as broker does not reveal, says it right here, any material terms or conditions of the offer without consumer's prior written consent. Fair housing. We all know we have to adhere to fair housing. So adheres to the principles expressed in the Fair Housing Act and will not participate in any act that unlawfully discriminates on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, country of national origin, or any category protected under federal, state, or local law. Service providers. Broker does not warrant or guarantee products or services provided by any third party whom broker recommends to consumer. If you recommend, 2 inspection companies or 3 inspection companies, 3 different appraisers, 2 different title companies, we are not warranting or guaranteeing any products or services for people that we may recommend and that they use in connection with the property acquisition. Okay, so it's protecting you there as well. Consumer's obligations. Now, this is what the consumer's obligations, the buyer's obligations are to you. Consumer agrees to cooperate with broker in accomplishing the objectives of this agreement, including immediately contacting the broker upon deciding to negotiate for the acquisition of 1 or more of the above listed properties, informing any other real estate licensee with whom consumer has contact that consumer has contracted to work with broker with regard to the properties listed above, providing broker and necessary third parties, i.e. any lenders, closing agents, with accurate information requested by broker or third parties in connection with ensuring consumer's ability to acquire the property. Consumer authorizes broker to run credit check. Now, obviously, we are not going to do this. So I would scratch this out because we're not doing this, right? We're not agreeing to run their credit. But this is a conversation that now you can have with them and say, look, Mr. Buyer, I'm not going to run your credit. I'm not going to check your income. I'm not going to do any of that. But before I go show you these houses, have you already spoken to a lender? Do you already have a pre-approval? Are you working with another realtor? Right? So these are all things that you have to now have a conversation, but you can scratch that out because you're not going to do it and have, you know, them initial here. Okay. And credit information, indemnifying and holding broker harmless from losses, damages, costs, and expenses of any nature that broker incurs because of consumers' negligence, misrepresentations, or defaults on any agreement. Consulting appropriate professionals for legal, tax, environmental, engineering, foreign reporting requirements, and other specialized advice. And making a diligent, good faith effort to perform the contract terms of any purchase agreement or contract to lease and close on the sale of any property consumer contracts to acquire. Now, let's remember, we are not attorneys, we are not accountants, we are not engineers, we're not 1031 exchange people, we're not FERPTA. So this is basically just letting them know that if they need any of that, they have to get that on their own. We are not responsible for any of that, okay? All right, so compensation. Broker's compensation is earned when during the term of this agreement or any renewal of or extension, consumer or any person acting for or on behalf of the consumer contracts to acquire real property as specified in this agreement. So, for example, you have a mom and dad, right? They want to go see this property. Those are the people that you put on this agreement. And maybe you put the son, even though the son is really not going to be on the loan, but you put the son. The son can also be part of this agreement because it's telling you that they can basically, any person acting for or on behalf of the consumer contracts to acquire real property as specified in this agreement. This compensation is for broker services for consumer. Compensation received by broker, if any, from an owner or owner's broker for services rendered to consumer will reduce any amount owed by consumer per this paragraph. So this again is talking about that discussion we had about whatever fee you put on this contract and it is getting paid. So because obviously you're going to put on this contract what your professional fee is going to be for helping them. If the seller pays a part of that compensation, you cannot charge like double compensation. You will only be able to charge up to, let's say you put 3% and the seller's agent or the listing agent is paying 2%, you can only collect from the buyer 1%. You cannot collect the 3% or the 2% over here and the 3% over here, okay? Just be clear of that. All right, consumer, buyers, and broker, authorized associate. This again is going to be up to our broker whether he is authorizing us to be able to initial on their behalf. However, if the broker has to sign in certain places anyway, let's just have the broker sign everywhere. Why would we want that liability? Let the broker do all that, okay? Purchase or exchange. Here's where you're going to put your compensation. Now, if it's a purchase, if they're purchasing or they're doing an exchange, how much are you going to charge them? Are you going to charge them a flat fee for that transaction if they decide to make an offer, or a percentage? Select only one. Can't say $5,000 or 3%. You can't do that. You have to put an exact amount. You can't put in there between 1% and 3%. No, it has to be an exact amount, okay? And you cannot select both. You have to choose one or the other. Or flat fee or percentage plus any transaction fee. You can put a transaction fee here if you want them to pay the transaction fee. Again, only choosing one of the total purchase price or other consideration for the acquired property, payable no later than the date of closing specified in the sales contract. However, closing is not a prerequisite for broker's fee being earned. Let me repeat that. Closing is not a prerequisite for broker's fee being paid. What does that mean? You make an offer on a property, the buyer decides to, at the last minute, back out of this deal, right? They cancel their contract, even though you've done all the work. They cancel the contract. This still stipulates that if you want to still go after the buyer or the broker wants to go after the buyer, for the fee that they agreed to pay you because you did all your work. You put them under contract, you did all your due diligence, you negotiated, you did everything to get them to the closing table, and then at the last minute they back out. Then you are still entitled to compensation. But this is telling you, closing is not a prerequisite. So if they don't close on the property because they backed out, you can still collect your compensation if you so desire to. That's going to be totally up to you and the broker whether they want to pursue that. Okay. Lease. Here's where you can put lease. Now, I know a lot of people are in Central Florida, and I know that over there, leasing is not, they don't pay a lot. But here, you can charge the buyer, right, or the person leasing, you know, which I suggest you use this for your rentals too, these showing agreements, because now you can say, okay, Mr. Renter, tenant, you know, if you lease the property, this is how much I charge. $500, $1,000, a percentage of the total amount, lease amount for the year, whatever it is, right? Or 1 month's rent. Select only one, right? This is how much I charge. If I take you to these three properties that are listed on the sheet and you decide to rent them, but now the landlord is not paying a fee, guess what? Your tenant still has to pay you your fee for finding them that rental. So it protects you on your rentals as well. All right, so again, you can put that of the gross lease value payable when consumer enters into a lease with the owner. If consumer enters into a lease purchase agreement, the amount of the leasing fee which broker receives will be credited towards the amount due broker for the purchase. This is if they enter into a like lease to own program or a lease to purchase program. Okay. Other compensation for all other types of acquisitions, see additional terms. Retainers. This is, we as La Rosa Realty, we all know that La Rosa Realty does not hold escrow. So we will not be using retainers, okay? Because we don't have an escrow account unless La Rosa Realty decides to do that at a later date. If they do, then at that point we can charge a retainer, basically a fee that is, again, it's a retainer fee for broker services provided for consumer, is earned and payable upon execution of this agreement. This retainer is in addition to any compensation earned by broker. Broker and consumer agree that the retainer is for the real estate services described herein and does not constitute a fee paid for a rental information list as described in section 475. So this is usually for rentals, like a rental retainer for rentals. But again, we do not hold escrow, so we do not work with retainers. Additional terms, any additional terms to this condition? You know, it could be if seller decides to purchase new construction and the developer is offering a bonus, any and all bonuses will be paid to the broker. Okay, something of that nature, because remember, we might not be covered with new construction bonuses because we can only put a set fee or a percentage. We cannot, and we don't know what that might be, right? So you can maybe add that there. Dispute resolution. This agreement will be construed under Florida law. All controversies, claims, and other matters in acquisition between the parties arising out of the or relating to this agreement or the breach thereof will be settled by first attempting mediation. So again, if there's some dispute regarding payment, you will go to mediation first and meet with a mediator if you decide to pursue it. If that you cannot come to an agreement, they will go to arbitration. If they initial this, right? So if all parties initial this, that if there's a dispute, you're going to go to the mediator. And if the mediation doesn't work, you're going to go to arbitration. If no one signs this, you cannot take it to arbitration. You can just try to mediate it. Okay. And again, after arbitration, if for some reason you can't figure that out, then you might want to take them to small claims court. All right, acknowledgement modifications. Consumer has read this agreement and understands its contents. This agreement cannot be changed except by written agreement signed by both parties. Electronic signatures will be acceptable and binding. Brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. Remember that. Brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. Broker may not receive compensation from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to with the consumer. Goes back again. If you said, Mr. Buyer, I'm only charging you 3%, but then you find out that the listing agent or the seller is willing to cooperate 4%, you're only getting paid 3%. You cannot take the 4% because you're just saying right now that you're not going to receive any compensation from any source that exceeds the amount of rates agreed with this consumer. So if I told the buyer it's going to be 3%, that's all I'm getting. Okay. However, consumer agrees that broker may receive separate compensation from owner of the property for services rendered to owner by the broker for which consumer will not be responsible. Okay. You're representing both buyer and seller. And obviously you had already a contract. Let's say you have the listing and then all of a sudden you find the buyer. You still have to have this exclusive buyer agreement with that buyer. But it's just letting the buyer know, disclosing that, hey, you know, you might have to pay me. Let's say the seller is paying 3% only for me to list their house or sell their house. And I'm charging the buyer the 3%. The seller can still pay me my 3% for listing his property, and the buyer pays me my 3% for helping them with the purchase of the property. Okay, so it's just disclosing it. Date, consumer, address, zip code, telephone number, just regular information, right? Date, authorized associate or broker. Again, just have the broker sign it unless, again, La Rosa says it's okay for us to sign, okay? Copy returned to consumer on. Always put here when all parties have signed and when you've delivered this document to your buyer. Was it a personal delivery? Maybe you went to the first property and you had them sign there. Was it personal delivery? Was it through mail or email? That really should say email, not mail. And facsimile, because nobody's going to mail anything. They should add email here as well. Okay. Florida Realtors makes no representation as to the legal validity and adequacy of any provision of this form in any specific transaction. So just read the small print here. Okay, it's just a standard form. They're not, that makes no representation. Florida Realtors makes no representation as to the legal validity. Okay. Consumer signs, broker's associate signs, and we are done. So again, this is showing agreement for dating purposes, for specific properties that you're going to list here. But once you've moved on and you've showed them these 3 properties and they still want to continue to work with you, at that point, you have to have an exclusive buyer agreement signed before you take them to see any more properties. Just be clear on that, okay? You cannot show properties at all, no exceptions, no nothing. The fines that they are giving are very high. So make sure that you do not screw this up, please. You have to have a showing agreement or an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement to show property. No exceptions, none, 0. Don't get creative. Thank you so much. Again, don't forget to subscribe somewhere around here. Make sure you like this video, share it with your colleagues so that they can get the information as well. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next class on the next form.